Okay, thanks, Rubens. Thank you all who logged in. I'm very excited to be here. And this is actually the first time we present these results to an audience of economists. So we will be very happy to hear your comments and suggestions and to see if you find this as interesting as we did. So let me start with some broad motivation on artificial intelligence and its effects on labor markets. We all know that artificial... eu não dei share screen, sorry. Just a second. Desculpa, gente, não sei o que está acontecendo aqui com o Zoom. Pronto, vai dar certo. E agora? Tudo certo? Everything okay? Okay, I'm sorry. So let me start with some broad motivation on artificial intelligence and on its effects on labor markets. We all know that artificial intelligence shifted the limits of which tasks can be automated. And in doing so, it largely relocated tasks between human labor and technology. But perhaps because artificial and human intelligence are seen as imperfect substitutes on production functions, this also revived a debate on what should be and what should not be automated. In education, this controversy has surrounded the topic of the use of automated writing evaluation systems. At their core, these systems use natural language processing to extract features that are related to essay quality. And they also use machine learning algorithms to generate scores and allocate feedback based on the features that are extracted by the NLP. The supporters of AWE highlight that these systems may relax teacher time constraints and allow teachers to use more time in tasks that will not and cannot be perfectly automated. They also tend to highlight that these systems may help circumvent teachers' human capital constraints, which will be even more important in developing country contexts such as ours. The critics, however, argue that artificial intelligence is, per definition, blind to the meaning of texts, and in this sense that it cannot emulate human parsing, grading, and feedback behavior. So we believe that this controversy largely bypasses one of the most interesting questions from an economics and a policy perspective, which is whether these technologies can affect learning after being incorporated into instruction. So this is where we come in. We study two educational technologies, or edtechs, that were designed to improve scores in the argumentative essay of the National Secondary Education Exam, the NA. Both edtechs were designed and were designed to be focused on learning among public school seniors. Interestingly, these edtechs use different combinations of artificial and human intelligence. So the first edtech, which we'll call the pure AWE, uses only the artificial intelligence to provide grades and feedback. Since this edtech uses only the AI, it can do this instantaneously. The second edtech, which we will call the enhanced AWE, uses the AI, passes on the AI grades and feedback to human graders, who supervise these grades and feedback and submit a full grading with a lag of 3 days. So let me provide a little bit more of background on the National Secondary Education Exam. I believe that most of the audience is made of Brazilians, but I would be happy to discuss the importance of ENEM with anyone who's not from Brazil. But ENEM is a key determinant of access to post-secondary education in Brazil, just to give an idea of its size, 5 million people, and 70% of the total of high school seniors in Brazil enrolled in ENEM in the year of our study. One of the interesting features of scores in the ENEM exam is that the private school premium is much larger in the essay than in the multiple choice test scores. So as we can see in this figure, it is approximately 2 times the gap in the larger. It is about 2 times the size of the largest premium in multiple choice test scores, which is the one in mathematics. So so this highlights the importance of our study, because these both edtechs, despite large differences in functioning and costs, both edtechs could make public school students more competitive for post-secondary education admission. So this slide tries to provide background on how the students' essays are graded by the official ENEM graders. So for instance, in 2019, as is standard in the ENEM exam, the topic of the essay was a social issue, broadly defined. So in 2019, this topic was the democratization of access to cinema in Brazil. The first set of skills that graders value is what we call in the paper synthetic skills. So here the graders look at the ability of students to use the formal written norm of written Portuguese, of Portuguese, and to build a text that is fluid, both within and across paragraphs, using argumentative connectives. The second set of skills is what we call in the paper analytical, and here students are evaluated in terms of their ability to interpret and use the information from the motivating elements of the essay, and their ability to mobilize concepts from several areas of knowledge that were acquired through the schooling process. Most interestingly, and this is specific from ENEM, a final set of skills that is evaluated is the so-called policy proposal. So students are required to propose an intervention that is consistent with the thesis developed in the essay concerning the social issue at hand. And if you look at the private school premium, now within these sets of skills, we see that the gap, the private public school gap is increasing in the complexity of the writing skill. Just a little bit more of information on our experiment. We designed and implemented a field experiment in Espírito Santo in Brazil. It happened in 2019. We randomized 178 schools into 3 treatment arms. So 55 schools to the pure AWE arm, 55 schools to the enhanced AWE arm, and the remaining 68 schools were formed the control group. At baseline, we observed approximately 19,000 students. So we observed high and very similar levels of compliance with the treatment in each of the 5 writing activities that were part of the EdTech programs. Among teachers, more than 95 assigned essays through the platform, and this assignment behavior did not change throughout the year. Among students, 75 to 80% submitted essays through the platform, and if we perform statistical tests, we cannot reject the null that the general compliance between teachers and students was equal in both treatment arms, despite the large differences in the edtechs. So let me now move to our main results. This graph plots the ITT estimates of both edtechs. The full circles are for the enhanced AWE, and the hollowed circles are for the pure AWE edtech. So the first main result is that both edtechs had positive and very similar impacts on ENEM writing scores if we consider the full score. These effects were channeled by improvements in each set of skills considered separately. And interestingly, the largest effects are found for the most sophisticated skill, the policy proposal. If we look at the p-values in below the estimates, we cannot reject the null in any neither in the full score or in the sets of skills that the ITTs are equal between treatment arms. Regarding mechanisms, we collected primary data to investigate three issues. First of all, we were interested in whether the technologies would increase the amount of training for the NA assay. And we find, if you look at the leftmost plot, leftmost coefficients in the figure, we find that both edtechs were able to increase the number of written essays by 25 to 30%. We are able to reject increases of less than 20% in this case, and we cannot reject the null that these increases, that these improvements in training were equal across treatment arms. We also looked at feedback, either in the form of annotations or in the form of grades, and we observed similar and high increases in those margins. And most interestingly, we see that teachers in the treatment arms were more likely to engage in personal discussions with teachers on their essay quality. So we find that teachers did not completely delegate tasks to the edtechs, and that the edtechs somehow allowed them to put more time in tasks that cannot be automated. So tasks that are non-routine in essence, such as interpreting the essay after receiving the feedback, and interacting with students about their essay writing abilities. We also looked at effects on a range of secondary outcomes. We were interested in effects on other writing skills, or more specifically on skills that would appear in another textual genre. So we collected primary data on students using a biography, so a narrative essay, not an argumentative essay. We find no evidence of positive or negative effects. So positive effects would be consistent with spillovers between skills that are transportable across genres, and negative effects would be consistent with training to the test and becoming unable to write an essay or less able to write a good essay in another textual genre. We find evidence that the edtechs had no positive or negative effects on this margin. And we using the scores in NA and in the state's standardized exam, we also find evidence that the edtechs did not affect scores in language-related and in non-language related topics. So, and notice that because we pull this data, we get quite precise estimates. We can rule out positive or negative effects of more than half a standard deviation on this margin. So let me end up with some final remarks, taking stock of what we learned with this intervention, with this study. Both edtechs had positive effects on writing scores, and the additional input from human graders, albeit costly, did not improve effectiveness, either in the full score or in the scores that capture very different writing skills and add up to the full score. Most interestingly, we find positive effects even in skills that AI arguably would fall short in evaluating, such as the most complex skills valued in the exam. And we find that the edtechs similarly supported the engagement of teachers on non-routine tasks that are at the core of a pedagogy that is individualized and that contemplates students' heterogeneity. So this is the final slide, and I'm going to talk a little about how we view our contributions. The contributions map quite naturally in the comparisons between treatment arms in the experiment. So the comparison between the pure AWE EdTech and the control provides the first impact evaluation, and I'm not talking only about developing countries, that relies on a large sample and a credible research design. I would be happy to discuss the limitations of the literature on this topic with anyone that's interested. Second, the comparison between the enhanced AWE EdTech and the control group is an efficacy trial of an EdTech that was tailored by the implementer to overcome two very important bottlenecks of pedagogy in public schools, which are human capital and time constraints. So given that they have a very rich view of these constraints, it was surprising to us that there was no added value of human graders. From a policy perspective, this is a very important result because human graders are costly, because employing human graders is costly, either because you have to pay them or because you have to monitor their work continuously. So thank you very much. I hope I have not exceeded the time. No, right? Still have 3 minutes.
Almost 4 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much. Audio de Paula.
Any questions?
Yeah, I have a question.
Hi, Audio.
Hi.
Please.
So if I understand correctly, especially the second bullet point in your final slide refers to some notion of substitutability between the tech and humans. I'm not sure if the graders are dedicated graders or teachers themselves, but other results in your presentation also suggest that there is some complementarity between the technology and the teachers engaging more with the students. So you seem to have found evidence of that, which is interesting per se, because when people talk about AI, they typically have this image of the robots coming to replace humans. Whereas here it seems that they're working together with the teachers. I mean, they're improving they're improving the feedback that the students get, but also somehow incentivizing the input that comes from the teachers, if I understand correctly.
Yeah, that's how we interpret the evidence. On substitution and complementarity, we are taking a little bit of care about using these concepts, because we within a design, a more complex design, where some schools have access to the technology and some schools have access to the technology, and we randomize the amount of this use. So we think this is consistent with, as you said, human graders substituting substituting the edtechs, the AI, I'm sorry, and with teachers and the edtechs being complementary, but we're not using this
because
concept.
I mean the teachers will also optimally, quote unquote, respond to the tech themselves, and the question is whether they're gonna withdraw input or introduce more quality input. That would be very interesting to pursue, but I'm not going to take any more of the remaining time. Thank you.
Thank you, Audio. Thank you very much.
Henrique?
Hello, Flavio. I have one doubt about, it's not exactly a doubt, but it's a question with regards to how do you interpret the results in light of possible mechanisms. It's my understanding there are no effects for other writing abilities, rather only for the inane text. So I'm thinking about, well, how do you interpret that? Because and also if you have tried to measure anything related with motivation or emotional skills with regards to having a test. So that's my doubt.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sorry, I can't see who's speaking. What's your name?
My name is Henrique. Sorry if.
Oh no, no problem. Thanks, Henrique. Thanks. That's a very good question. Some I should have explained this a little bit better, but some writing skills are the same between the two textual genres. So the synthetic skills, which so basically writing correctly, would be transportable across the skills. So the fact that we did not find evidence of effects on these writing skills, we would need to look. I can talk about this a little bit more with you later, but we looked at the effects on skills that are transportable between genres and the ones that aren't. And so this provides a little bit more of insight about how to interpret these results. And on motivation, we tried to address this by looking at other secondary outcomes, because one story that would be consistent with increases in motivation for the NA assay would be improvements in other scores that are evaluated by NA, correct? And we do not find evidence that that this happened. This is also consistent with a result that I did not present, but the edtechs did not make students more willing, more likely more willing to be in post-secondary education in the next year. So motivation does not seem to be playing a large role in these results. But I would be happy to talk to you a little bit more about.
This procedure only helped them on an NA assays. In fact, you don't see any results outside of that scope. It's only for NA that things are being really relevant.
Yeah, only scores in the NA assay were responsive to the edtechs. This is the basic takeaway. But thank you for the question.
Okay, Bruno or Tony, if your question is really quick, because we have like 2 minutes.
Okay.
Well, I'm sorry, I'm still with the background from Unpack here, but well, congratulations, Flavio, on your presentation. It was really nice. I had 2 questions, and I'm only going to ask one of them.
Okay.
Could you talk a little bit more about, just because of time constraints, but could you talk a little bit more about your data? How did you, because what I understood is that you had the experiment and then you found the people in NA, right? The grades you're using are from how these students performed in NA, is that it? And how did you find them?
Yeah, so the randomization used clusters. We randomized schools, and the NA microdata identifies students by the net code of each school. So we did not, I don't know if I understand the question correctly, but we did not uniquely identify students in the NA microdata, and we did not, this wasn't necessary to do the evaluation. One thing that I did not discuss carefully is that we also collected primary data. We also collected primary data on an NA assay. So the estimates on NA assay scores pull the data from the official NA assay and the data from this primary data we collected with the educational authority of the state. So I don't know if this answers your question, but this is
it answers. So you
our main data set pulls. Our main data set pulls data from NA, the official NA assay, and primary data on a non-official NA assay we collected.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I would be happy to answer your second question if you send me a chat or
Yeah, it was more about interpretation. How do you interpret your results, given that, I mean, you didn't find much of a difference between the enhanced AI and the pure AI? I mean, because is this related to the quality of the AI that you're using? I mean, how do you interpret this? Because you would expect, usually AI is not that good on feedback with respect to texts, you know, and written exams, from what I know. So how much do you think this maybe is like an evaluation of the quality of the specific AI you used in your exam? Or
so this is not, thank you. This is we don't have time?
No, we don't have time. If you can answer through text or through the chat.
Okay, who's talking? I'm sorry, I didn't get your name here.
My name is Bruno.
Bruno Tony.
Oh, Bruno. Okay. Thanks, Bruno. I'll answer it in the chat, okay?
All right.
Thank you all very much.
Okay, so now it's Marcela.
Okay. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes, go ahead.
Thanks everybody for coming. I'm gonna present my work with my co-author, Julia Buccioni, who's here in the audience. So the Pentecostal Church is one of the fastest growing religious movement in the world. Two important characteristics of this religion is their intense use of media and that they are more conservative than other Christian faiths. Although they have been growing a lot, there's still very little evidence on the socioeconomic causes and consequences of their expansion. So in this paper, we address two questions. The first is to understand what is the effect of religious media on religious affiliation. And then we try to understand what is if religious media can also affect behaviors in a way that is consistent with the church's prescription. To do so, we exploit the expansion of Record TV, and we look first at religious affiliation, and then we check whether people start behaving consistent with the church's prescription. And in particular, we focus on fertility, labor force participation, voting, and crime. The idea of looking at crime is that many of the values of the church is pro familia and say that you can drink or gambling. So people are less likely engaging in risky behavior, so that could affect crime. So Record TV was a secular TV channel, and in the 80s, it went bankrupt. And in 1990, it was bought by Edir Macedo and started broadcasting religious content. To give you an idea of how much religious content, one study estimates that Record TV broadcasts 60 hours of religious content per week, while the other leading two TV channels were broadcasting around 1 hour and 12 minutes of religious content. So it's a significant difference. So this graph shows the expansion of Record TV across Brazilian municipalities over time. So see here that in the beginning of the 80s, they covered very little municipalities, only 10%. And then in the 90s, they already covered around 30%. But over the 90s, there was a huge expansion. And by 2000, they covered more than half of the Brazilian municipalities. We focus our study in this period of the 90s. We use 5 main sources of data. First, we use 3 waves of the Brazilian census, which gives us for each individual their religious affiliation, fertility, labor force participation, and demographic characteristics. Then we use data from Anatel, which gives us the technical characteristics of transmitters, their precise location, the date of installation, and the owner. For our analysis, we select only the transmitters that are owned by Record TV. For our voting outcomes, we use data from the Federal Electoral Authority, which gives us information on candidates' profiles. So we know their name, the campaign alias, age, gender, and we also know the number of votes that each candidate received in each municipality. Then for our crime data, we use the number of deaths by external causes. And finally, we use data from the Brazilian RIS. And from this data, we know exactly the number of Pentecostal churches in each municipality in each year. So using data from Anatel, we can compute the signal strength from each transmitter to each receiving location in each year. So for each municipality, we take the maximum value of the signal strength for each year. We compute 2 types of signal strength. The first is what we call the signal in the free space, which is a function of the power of the transmitter and the distance between the transmitter and the receiving location. Then we compute also the actual signal strength, which also takes into account the geomorphological characteristics. So it takes into account if there was, for instance, a mountain that can block the signal, or if there's some vegetation or something that could diffract the signal. This actual signal is a very strong predictor of actual audience and has been largely used in the literature. In our main empirical strategy, we regress our outcome of interest on the signal strength, the signal in the free space, on individual and municipality characteristics that change over time, municipality fixed effects, and state year fixed effects to allow for state-specific shocks. And we cluster our standard errors at the municipality level. So our parameter of interest is gamma 1. So our identification comes from the installation of new transmitters over time. So the idea here is that we compare the evolution of places in which there was an increase in the signal strength with places with the evolution of places in which the signal didn't increase. And we also, the idea here of controlling for the signal in the free space is that it's possible that places that are closer to the transmitters have trends different from places that are farther away. Like, for instance, it's possible that Record TV installed the transmitters in places that are growing faster. If it is the case, then this trend will be picked up by the signal in the free space. So to be clear, the signal in the free space is picking up trends that are related to the distance to the transmitter, but are not the actual coverage. So our coefficient of interest is identified net of changes in the distance to the transmitter. So in our main results here in column 1, we look at the fact of the actual signal on the share of Pentecostals. And here we are not controlling for the signal in the free space, neither for individuals or municipality controls. And we had only time fixed effects, but not state time zero fixed effects. And we see that an increase here, the signal is standardized. So it's one standard deviation in the signal strength leads to an increase in the share of Pentecostals. Then in column 2, we add as a control the signal in the free space and individual and municipality controls, and we see a similar result. And then finally, in column 3, we also control for state year fixed effects, and again, we see a similar result. In column 4, we do a falsification test, so we do the same analysis, but for the period before Record being religiously affiliated, so for the 80s. And here we don't see an effect, so an increase in the signal around this period didn't increase the share of Pentecostals. And finally, we look at the effect for Catholics and Protestants. So we see a negative effect for Catholics and no effect for Protestants. This is consistent with the sociology literature that says that most of the Pentecostals are former Catholics, but not former Protestants, which didn't change much over time. So one limitation of the census data is that we only have data every 10 years. So it's possible that Pentecostals increased before the signal. So the share of Pentecostals would predate the installation of the signals. So we use data on the number of churches, which is yearly data, to give some evidence that this is not happening. So we construct an event study in which the x-axis it's when a municipality started being covered by Record TV. So in time 0, it's when the municipality gets a signal that is strong enough to ensure viewership, and we see that there is a positive increase in the number of Pentecostal churches around this period, and we don't see any difference for the periods in which the municipality was not covered by Record TV. We conduct several robustness checks. The first one, we look at selection. So the idea here is to see whether our outcome is actually triggering the treatment. If it's an increase in, whether the transmitters are being placed according to the share of Pentecostals in 1991. We don't find any evidence of that. Then next, we use an alternative empirical strategy. So we use an IV strategy in which we instrument the signal in 2000 by the signal before record being religious affiliated. So the idea here is to use only the variation coming from the transmitters installed, using only the variation from transmitters installed before record being religious affiliated. So the idea here is that the placement of these transmitters was not done based on any religious ambition of record TV. Here we found a similar effect. So the fact using this alternative strategy, we find a similar effect compared to the other strategy. Then to ensure that our results are coming from actual exposure to record TV and not from unobservable characteristics correlated to the signal strength, we control for the signal in the future, so in the next year. So the hypothesis for this exercise is that if you control for the exposure to record TV in year T, then when we add exposure in the year T+1 does not predict our outcome, and we find that the coefficient for the signal in the future is indeed it's 0 and is statistically different from the current signal. Next, because big cities might be the target of the placement of the transmitters, because then they can reach more population per transmitters. And then this place might have trends that are different from smaller municipalities. We drop from the analysis and we find similar results. Similarly, we drop from our analysis places where municipalities where the transmitter was located and surrounding municipalities, and again, we find the same results. And next, we compare municipalities that are close to each other, so that they share similar labor markets and they are susceptible to similar local shocks, and the places that are also very similar in terms of signal in the free space. So they are at the same distance from the transmitters, and then we do the analysis in these municipalities, and we see again that an increase in the signal of record TV leads to an increase in the share of Pentecostals. Now I'm going to show the results for behaviors. First, let's look at fertility. So we see here that an increase in the signal strength leads to an increase in fertility. These results make sense because the Pentecostal Church promotes the values of the family, so that people should try to build a family, to get married, and also they don't encourage women to study much, and they also say that women should stay at home while the men work. And so consistent with this story, we found a negative impact for female labor force participation and a positive impact for male labor force participation. This is consistent with the man being the breadwinner of the house and the woman staying at home, taking care of the husband and the kids. Next, we find a negative impact for homicides rate. And finally, for the share of votes, we find a positive impact for Pentecostal candidates and a negative impact for Catholic candidates. So our data on fertility has the advantage that we can actually construct a larger panel. So for each woman, we know how many kids she has, we know the age of each kid, so we can retrieve the year of birth of each kid. So in a similar fashion, we construct an event study, and we show that the probability of giving birth after being covered by record TV, it's increases, and we don't see much going on here, and these coefficients they are not jointly significant. And well, this is what I have. I can go in more details on the robustness text, but I think I would be happy to take your questions now, since I have 5 minutes. And thank you very much.
Henrique.
Hey, thanks, Marcelo, for your presentation. I was thinking about mechanisms, especially because if record is the real deal here and television is important, maybe we should expect substitutability and complementarity of record with other types of media. So have you seen if the effects are higher or stronger with radio, internet presence, or if they are lower? And also, I don't know if that's a general feeling of the audience, but I have a feeling that to me, it wasn't very clear why controlling for signal free or something like that, the variable was called like that, would make your identification better. So if you could re-explain that, I would be very grateful.
Okay, thank you. So we didn't check for other kinds of media. We know that TV is a very strong type of media. Internet was not widely spread at this time, so I think people didn't have computers at their place at this time, like with the internet and so on. But indeed, radio could be something. It could be something important. And so for the signal in the free space, the idea is to control for the distance to places that are more central. Like if record TV places their transmitters in places that are going faster, that are wealthy, then our outcomes could be, our effect could be coming from not the signal, but for the fact that they are closer to these municipalities. So the effect that we are would be picking up is not related to the signal, but would be instead related to the fact that they are closer to these municipalities. As like we control for distance, we can also think about the signal in the free space as just the distance through the transmitter. Then we are controlling for that. So we ensure that not we ensure completely, but we have more confidence that our effect is coming from the actual signal and not because these places are closer to central areas, places that are getting richer or growing faster. I don't know if this helped.
There's a question from Thiago. He asks, how do you identify Pentecostal and Catholic candidates?
Oh, so I followed a paper by Costa, Rocha, and all, like from Rudi and Chico. And we identify when they disclose their occupation. So if in the name, in the campaign alias, if the person says pastor, something or something related to the church, like if you're a priest, if you're a pastor, if you're a minister, something like that. We to classify like that, we followed other studies that did the same.
I have a question.
Yes.
There's a paper from La Ferrara. First, congratulations, it's a very nice paper. But there's a paper from La Ferrara on the impact of global TV soap operas on fertility here in Brazil. So could this result affect your estimates on fertility?
So I think it's a bit unlikely because first of all, she looks at the effect on much on the 70s, I guess. And when the families were very big and then they look at the TV and they mimic their behavior. So our results are actually coming an opposite trend than hers because she found a decrease in the fertility rate. So when you watch TV Globo, the novellas, families tend to have less kids. And here we found exactly the opposite, that that being exposed to record TV could increase fertility. So if there's any interaction with her effect, I think this is more likely for us to be underestimating our effects.
No further questions. I have like 1 minute, 2 minutes maybe. Okay, so thank you, Marcela.
Thank you.
Danielle, go ahead.
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to present at SPE. So this paper is about the effects of job training programs. It's a joint work with Rodrigo Oliveira and Diana Silva, who are both here with us. Governments around the world have been implementing policies to tackle persistent unemployment. Improve skills and labor market outcomes of workers. Those policies, the returns of those policies vary hugely and may be influenced by business cycles. So it's really important to understand what policies work in which context. So in this paper, we're going to focus on one specific type of policy, vocational training programs. Okay, vocational training courses, they aim to improve matching between firm demand and workers to ease transition from education to work. To be precise, those training programs, vocational training programs, can be provided by the private sector with and without subsidies, or directly by the public sector. In this context that we study here in Brazil, is a training program directly provided by the public sector. Okay, as we will explain a little bit later in 2 slides, it's a long duration, intensive vocational training program. Okay, so we investigate the effects on post-course placement decisions. Okay, namely, whether you're going to be a worker, you're going to set up a firm, or you're going to continue your studies in a given university. Okay, an important feature of this program is that admission is through lotteries. And we were able to get data of 200,000 applicants and 15,000 winners, and the national ID of each one of the applicants. So we are able to follow, because of the national ID, we are able to follow the applicants in different registries. So this is how we collect our outcome variables. And those applicants, they belong to basically 2 cohorts, and they have graduated at different moments of the business cycle. Okay, and then we assess the impact on employment of female students, male students, and we find that regardless of the moment of the business cycle, female students, they perform better in terms of employment compared to the male students. So this is the main result of the paper. And we show that the returns of the program are higher when students, they graduate before a recession and not during a recession. We do not find any impact on earnings. Okay, we perform some heterogeneity analysis, and we find that the positive impacts on employment are driven by students graduating in services, okay, courses, vocational courses in services, and when they graduate in locations, local economies that are faster growing in terms of local GDP. When we assess the impact of the program on setting up a firm, that is on being an entrepreneur or university admission, we don't find any impact. Okay, So this is the, the summary of the paper. Because of time constraints, I'm sure I will be unable to detail every single part. So that's why I'm giving upfront this broader picture of the paper. Just to emphasize our setting, we are talking about one state in Brazil, Bahia state, where the public sector provides what we call a high dosage program. Why we call it a high dosage program? Because it has different features, okay, that's quite unique in the literature. We have one semester, the course lasts 2 years. Every course lasts 2 years. One semester is of basic training like Portuguese, math, okay? You have 2 semesters of class training of specific subjects for, the occupation of the vocational training course. So it's more focused on the occupation. And then you have a 6 month plus 6 months of internship. So it's a combined 2 years, and it's it's on the high end of duration when we compare to the literature on training. I will not discuss the literature, but basically our contributions that we compare to papers with a similar research design. We are assessing long-term effects. We are assessing also different placement decisions, okay? Not only labor employment in a formal firm. And because we have a large-scale program, we use this feature to perform heterogeneity analysis not yet done by the literature. So I will now detail a little bit the program. It's called ProSub, whose goal is to provide, these technical skills to tackle high unemployment in the Bahia state. Of course, I think all of you know Bahia state, but it's a large state in Brazil whose territory is larger than France, for instance. And the government, the state government, runs the program in different, local training institutes in 50 municipalities. Okay, and with a huge variety of courses in agriculture, manufacturing, and services. To apply for a position at the program is free. If you enroll in the program, is free. Tuition, okay, is free throughout the entire course. So as you can imagine, some courses have low demand, some of them very high demand, okay. As I said before, it's a very intensive, long duration course and mixed basic education, vocational education, and internship. Everyone from the Bahia state who finished a public school are eligible to apply for a position as a student at the vocational training, regardless of age, employment history, and other characteristics. Okay, so this also explains the high demand for most of the courses. And this is Bahia, of course, in Brazil. And just to emphasize that the training institutes are spread, in different parts of the large territory of the state. And because it's in different parts of the state, the economic reality differs, from one area to the other, and we're going to exploit this heterogeneity in our analysis. Admission is only through lotteries in the in the years that we study here. So in a given year, one applicant can only apply for one slot at a specific course in a specific training institute. Okay, but in the other year, the same applicant can apply again. Okay, so there are some people applying, many years. Some of them apply just one year. The education department itself of the state government performed the randomization with some partners, okay, including auditing partners, and they created randomized waiting lists. So for each course, suppose you have 1,000 applicants, so they randomize the rank, okay, and if this course has 30 slots, the education department calls the 30 people in the first positions. If, you know, some slot is available, then the education department keeps, you know, calling the other people from the waiting list until all slots are filled. In this paper, to be more precise, we work with 2 cohorts, okay? Those who started the course in 2012, we were talking about a little bit over 100,000 applicants, okay? And we, the second cohort started the course in March 2013. So the first one on March 2012, the second one on March 2013. And we're talking about a little bit less of 100,000 applicants for the second cohort. So just to, I will skip a little bit just to emphasize one point, is that, you know, these 2 cohorts, they graduated at different moments of the business cycle, okay? So the first cohort, sorry, it's a little bit small here in the paper, it's bigger. Next time I have to, you know, to dedicate one slide for each of these figures. Let's go. So the first cohort, okay, has, you know, graduated before a recession period, okay, in the state of Bahia. And the second cohort has graduated at the start of a recession period. Okay, and this we are trying to use this fact to interpret, you know, the results that we have from our regressions. Just to emphasize that the rules of the lotteries are publicized. You know, you can enter the internet, the website. We said that so this is you know, the website of the education department. And it's one interesting fact is that, as I said, we didn't carry out the lotteries. It was the Department of Education. And the idea was to give the same chance to every applicant. Okay, so they state this clearly here, okay, in this part. I don't know whether you can read it, but it's clearly stated here in this part of the website. And the lotteries are widely publicized. So you can enter the website. This is a Facebook, they post on Facebook, okay, intensively to recruit applicants for the lotteries. So basically, we use 4 registries in this paper to assess the impacts of the program. The first one is the ProSUB registry. So we have the national ID of all members of the waiting lists. Okay, we know also which ones end up enrolling at one course and finishing that course. Okay, even though we have the national ID, which is very important to be precise on the merging with the other registries, the program registry doesn't have much info on personal characteristics. Okay, basically we have only gender. Because the application form asks the national ID, the name, okay, and also like contact, email contact, telephone contact, alternative email contact, so the education, you know, department can reach, you know, winners. And so for all the applicants, we basically only have gender to use as a control variable. So we merge with RISE dataset, which everyone knows. So just to be clear, for each cohort, we analyze 6 years, up to 6 years after the lottery. So the first 2 years are during the course, okay? And then 4 years are after the course. We use a third registry from the Brazilian Internal Revenue Service, okay? It's a public data. And so we know the identification of each owner. Firm owner in Brazil, so we create a dummy if the applicant has established a firm, okay, after after the lottery date, so 01. We have also a registry for the largest university in the state of Bahia, the Federal University of Bahia. And we also create a dummy, which equals 1 for those applicants who entered the university after the lottery date. Okay. So for the RISE, we're going to be able to perform analysis in different moments of time, and we're going to perform cross-section analysis for entrepreneurship dummy and the university admission dummy. So the empirical strategy is quite simple. We use the result of the lottery to instrument for enrollment dummy. Okay, and one feature of the randomization is that naturally the education department created strata, okay, different strata. So each strata is a course and site, where site here is the location of the institution, the educational institution, okay, and according to the implementers, this stratification relied on operational constraints of the program. Just to be clear, here we can work with either or both initial offer winners and ever offer winners. The initial offer winners are those in the waiting list who are ranked up to the number of slots, okay, available for each course. And the ever offer winners are those called after, you know, if in the case slots are vacant. So in this paper, I don't have much time to talk about this, but we must work with initial offer winners because we don't know whether, you know, everyone in the waiting list was called upon. We just know the ones that enrolled, but we know precisely who are the initial offer winners. So our instrument is based on initial offer. I don't have time to show the balancing analysis, but for the characteristics that we have, everything is well balanced. So the lotteries created comparable groups. So the empirical strategy, we want to assess the effects of enrolling at the course, okay, which is this dummy D, okay, and we control for gender basically, and strata fixed effects, okay, and we instrument the enrollment dummy with our initial offer dummy. So let's talk quickly about the results. Do I have 4 minutes?
3.
3 minutes, okay. So this is comparing winners and non-winners. We, you know, for the cohort 1 who have graduated, remember that we have 2 years of the course, so they have graduated here, okay? So what we find is that for the cohort 1, you know, the effects of the program increases over time, even though, you know, there is a recession in the middle. When we separate for the impacts for female and male, we see that the female winners don't suffer much during the course, which may be because of low opportunity costs. Okay, we are trying to you know, go further in this analysis, but we don't have much to show now. But right after the finish of the course, you know, female applicants, they present a quite stable 5 percentage point increase in employment compared to the control group. When we see the male students, results are strikingly different. Okay, they have a negative impact. Okay, right after finishing the course, and they recover a bit. Okay, but not that much. We have a small positive, but not significant increase 6 years after the date of the lottery. So this is when we combine the effects for male and female of cohort 1, and for the year 1, 2, and 3 after they finishing the course, that is years 3, 4, and 5 after the lotteries. these coefficients are different, okay, when we perform the analysis. But in the last year, they're not statistically different. For cohort 2, who have graduated at the beginning of a recession period, okay, the overall impact is very, very different. We see after 6 years that the impacts are negative, but not statistically significant. Female students do not present positive effects. Male students, they keep with a negative effect almost throughout, okay, the years after the course. For instance, this one is significant at 10%, okay, but not significant at 5%. And these figures, when we put both cohorts together, and then we see that the overall picture of the second cohort, sorry, it's a typo here, it's the second cohort 2. The second cohort suffer more and don't present the positive results of the first cohort. I don't have much time as I expected, to go through the heterogeneity analysis, but these tables to show that courses in services, more specifically non-health services, are driving the positive results of female students of the cohort 1, okay, and those female students of the cohort 1 who have positive results are those located at municipalities where the GDP growth is above the median. The last table of the paper show that we find no impact on either university admission or entrepreneurship. And so this is the paper. We're planning to improve the paper, so any comments are very welcome. Thank you.
Okay, so we're out of time for questions. If anyone has any question, you can send it through the chat to Danielle.
Henrique?
No, I think he had the
I think it's an accident, sorry. Sorry about that.
Okay, so can everyone see the presentation? Yeah. All right, so this paper is still work in progress, early stages, I would say. It's derived from my dissertation, master's dissertation. What I want to do is find if electing business people or candidates from business backgrounds for mayors in Brazil, if it does influence the business environment of the city. And to do that, we use a regression discontinuity design. So recently there have been this intensively increasing number of politicians, of business politicians getting elected in the US, in Brazil, and in different levels in other countries. But in Brazilian case, entrepreneurs are one of the most common occupations from candidates to city for mayors. And there are mainly 3 ways that a mayor can impact the business environment of the city. It can be through fiscal incentives, although not much of the taxes are at the city level, but especially for several sectors, it has a space for doing that, for creating incentives. The mayor can provide infrastructure like connecting roads, providing street lighting. In some cases, they can even build space for invite companies to their cities. And most importantly, for bigger cities, the mayors have a power to decrease bureaucracy to open firms. In Brazil, it takes usually like 100 days to open a firm, and 30 to 40 days are related to documents and papers on the city level bureaucracy. Here is just some examples of candidates for mayors promoting this sort of a language. This sort of candidates, these business people candidates, they promote themselves as good managers, and they usually say that they're going to bring innovation and they're going to decrease bureaucracy, like this case of João Dória, who says he'll diminish time to open a company in São Paulo from 100 days to 1 week. So these are some examples. And there is some evidence regarding the overall performance of business people, politicians. The Beach and Jones, they find no evidence for electing business people in city councils in California, but they're looking at fiscal outcomes like revenues, city revenues and spending, and they find no effects. Blasky is more related to our paper. It's looking at mayors in Brazil, but his outcomes are also fiscal, and he finds no evidence of increasing in revenues or spending, but he finds a small effect on increasing the transfers received from higher government, from state and federal government. And there's this bigger literature that relates companies and business, like the companies that are related to politicians usually gain private returns. But there isn't this gap in the literature about gains to other firms in general, not only the firms connected to the politicians. So to the best of our knowledge, we're the first to ask what happens to the business environment, to the other companies, and not just the companies connected to those politicians. And Brazil is an interesting case because, as I said, the number of mayors from business backgrounds is relatively high. And since 2016, corporate donations are prohibited for campaigns, so the value of holding office increased. A company, it's harder to elect someone via funding, so it's better to just run for office themselves. And candidates may fund their own campaigns, so a wealthy candidate may have incentive to run if his probability of winning is higher. So the data we use are from the 2008-2012 elections from the TSE. The firm-related outcomes are from HISE, which is employer-employee match data sets. Covariates are from the IPEA data in BGE. These electoral data are not on the votes, but they have characteristics on the mayors, on the candidates, and they have also the declaration of assets, which is important for the definition of a business person. Our strategy is a simple RDD. Here, M is the margin of the business person, B is the treatment. So we're looking for the effect of getting elected, a businessman getting elected. These data too. And so this is the two samples, the two definitions we have about a business person. The first was based on the work of Blasky. He used the self-report. Candidates must report what are their occupations when they are running. And some of them report themselves as entrepreneurs. And we use entrepreneurs and merchants, people that are more accustomed to the everydays of firms. And the other definition, which I think is stronger, is from the declared assets. I took a sample of 500 candidates and manually selected those who were those who owned companies. And then using regular expressions, I try to predict that variable, that indicator. It's not a perfect match yet. I'm still working, perhaps using machine learning to do that, but this one used here has a high correlation, 0.92 or something. So we're using these two samples. This just summary statistics and balance tests. There's a slight problem for the self-reported sample, which there is difference in gender in education. The candidates from business backgrounds are usually less educated and are more frequently male. But not the rejects one has doesn't have this problem. But there is one thing, like they are not really similar samples, because as you can see, the mean population of the rejects definition is almost double. And also GDP, so bigger cities with this sample here. But so far, our main results are no results. There doesn't seem to be any effect at all on the net. The first outcome here is the net creation of firm jobs in level and in percentage terms. And this panel here for the self-reported sample, and this one here for the reject sample, and no effects at all. And you can see that the number of effective observations is not small, so I think that's more to zero than to poorly estimated. So here's the graphs for the firms and the employees. You see there doesn't seem to be any discontinuity in any of these, as you can see. So the other outcomes we look, since we find no effect in the net creation of firms and employees, is look at some of the labor force, labor market variables like wages, dismissals, if there's anything happen at all. And again, at the aggregate, at the city level, we find nothing, not with the self-reported sample or the reject sample. The same. So the next step was to separate firms by sector of activity. I separate firms into agriculture, industry, and service, which are 90 something% of the companies, the total companies, and still there is no effect. There doesn't seem to be any effect at the city sector level for neither of the samples. Again, and last, looking for heterogeneity, we separate cities by size, municipalities by size, because as Brazil has 5,500 something municipalities, and they are very diverse in terms of size and GDP. So we separate by the median. I call towns the smaller cities, the ones with equal or less the median population, and cities are the greater than the median. And you can see that there are very different groups. And we run again everything to see if there is any difference, if one of those types of cities could be having any effect. And there is no effect for cities, for bigger cities, but for towns finally appears that may be something going on. So there may be heterogeneous effects, but just in small towns, it seems like there is decreasing number of industry firms and employees, and maybe they're moving to service sector. This is the graphs for these small towns. And this for the employees in the small towns. As you can see, the service sector does seem that there's a discontinuity here. For the industry, not so much, not that clear, but it does seem that maybe something here. And the same for the same group, for these small towns. I run again for these variables related to labor market. And again, there's something going on, but in agriculture and just service, an industry service, which would be expected to have something because it's the one losing jobs and firms, has no effect. So we're still to look at this heterogeneity yet, but mainly results at the aggregate level, we find there's no evidence of effect, but we're still looking for the next steps. We're going to still run. We're going to do is we're going to check the entry exit of firms using the identified version of HISE. For this result so far, I didn't have access to the identified version for technical problems, but we're going to use it and test for firm entry exit. The definition of business person, perhaps try to find a more accurate definition with machine learning, like I said. We're searching for other firm-related outcomes, like the number of days to open a company. If we can get that, it would be nice. We're working perhaps with a data set with judicial processes and stuff. And another possible step was like we track candidates' business records, like the size of their companies, the sector they're in and stuff, to see if maybe the overall business environment will not change, but he can make promote the business in the other firms in the sector from his background. Like a man from the industry, understands industry and promotes more companies, firms from his type of business. So to conclude here, there is no evidence, we find no evidence of overall effect in business environment, but estimates, they differ depending on the definition of the business person you use. And there may be heterogeneous effects, which we will look for in more detail. And if there are these heterogeneous effects, that may be due to difference in the candidate's experience, as I said. So thank you. Let's see, any questions here? How do I see the chat? Okay, so let's see the first question. Okay, there's the question here from Clayton. He asks, what is the proportion of candidates self-reported as businessmen and non-businessmen in the data set? In the data set, I don't remember, but it's from business candidates and regarding all candidates, I think it's 8%, 7%, something like that. There any other questions?
I have a question. I was wondering whether you would look also at corruption or something like that, because probably in Italy we were the forerunners in having politicians that were businessmen, and we see that most like the outcomes were that corruption increased a lot where they were elected, while nothing changed, probably because they usually function in these persons very different from the usual one of other politicians that have like party affiliations, etc.
I couldn't hear something about corruption. Can you repeat, please?
Yeah, I was wondering if you would like to explore also the link with corruption, given that you don't find many effects on the variables you're looking to, since in Italy we had many businessmen starting to get into politics, and we observed that in general, nothing changed in terms of public expense, etc., while corruption rose mostly.
Yes. Well, we don't look at corruption. I think that this association between electing business person and private gains is kind of well documented. I don't know exactly about corruption, but we have no outcomes, nothing. I don't think we thought about running stuff, trying to search for outcomes or related to corruption stuff, but I don't know. I think it's kind of
Rubens,
well
just to
documented.
mention that, so I'm his co-author. So we might get something related to corruption when we link this data set with these judicial cases. So we have all this data set with this criminal suit case that might involve firms that are involved to this politician, this business guy that is now the mayor. So we might get to this point that we get case by case, and we're gonna have some idea if it's related to corruption at least.
Thanks.
Okay, still have like 2 minutes. Any other questions? Nope. Okay, so how do we close up this? Rodrigo?
Podemos encerrar a sessão?
Sim.
Ok, obrigado a todos os apresentadores. Vamos encerrar a sessão, então.
Muito obrigado, gente.
Obrigado.
Até mais.
Obrigada, gente.
Obrigado.